So Anweshaa Ghosh is a social science researcher with over 15 years of experience in qualitative and mixed methods research. She has led and been part of several gender and intersectional research projects in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh on women's unpaid paid domestic work, unpaid care work, the gig economy, and skilling, amongst others. She has also been at the forefront for developing and managing an online course on gender transformative evaluations at the Institute of Social Studies Trust, India. So, as you might have seen, that ISST has been a very, very big partner with us, and they have held several sessions with us. So, thank you so much, ISST and Anwesha, for agreeing to do this with us. I will now be sharing my screen, and we'll see Anwesha's presentation in a bit.
My name is Anweshaa Ghosh. I'm a research fellow and program lead at Institute of Social Studies Trust. This is a 40-plus organization doing cutting-edge and quality research around women's informal labor. This particular presentation is looking at skilling for women in non-traditional livelihoods and how does that move towards achieving women's economic empowerment. This particular presentation is based on the published study Beyond the Norm. Skilling in India has a long historical context with varied forms of skilling programs run by government, companies, CSOs, and now by various app and web-based platforms. Skilling women, however, has been a complex issue right from the beginning. Few women get skilled, even fewer in technical and non-traditional vocations, as can be seen in the statistics below. Even within the skilling ecosystem, skilling and vocational syllabuses have concentrated on feminized occupations such as tailoring, designing, papad or pickle making, etc., which are usually poorly paid and do not have opportunity of professional growth. Further, the wide digital gender gap also results in most women not being able to participate in technical or digital trainings. Women are generally poorly skilled, and over time, retention becomes an issue all across, owing to gender norms, women's paid and unpaid care work, lack of job opportunities, poor wages, etc. Skilling is closely related to national and global growth and development and intrinsic to women's empowerment. There is a direct connection of skilling women to various SDG goals, such as goal number 4, which is on quality education, goal 5, which is gender equality, and goal 8, which is on decent work and economic growth. This is very important and speaks to the UN SDG slogan of leaving no one behind. If we look at the slide, and if we look at the targets under goal 4, they very often speak about the importance of including women and their ability to access relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment and decent jobs and entrepreneurship. From the angle of goal 8, one sees that it's important to have these skills which will help them to achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including for young people and persons with disabilities, and equal pay for work and equal value. It is also importantly linked with goal 5, which is on gender equality, as the resource that the skill gives to the women, they will be able to have access and equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership and control over land, other forms of property, etc. 5b speaks about enhancing the use of enabling technology, in particular information communication technology, to promote empowerment of women. As such, digital skills are very, very important for women to access and have to have control over in order to have better jobs, in order to move beyond everyday drudgery of life. In the Indian context, the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, MSDE, began the Skill India initiative in July 2015. If we look at some of the relevant policies and programs and schemes around skilling women in India, the first one that is Most often, the most popular one is the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, PMKVY. And close to 50% of the candidates under this program are women. The Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushal Yojana, DDUGKY, is a placement linked skills development program for rural youth implemented by the Ministry of Rural Development. This provides for a 33% reservation for women, an important aspect for access to skilling for women. The skills acquisition and knowledge awareness for livelihood promotion, Sankalp scheme, implemented by the MSDE in collaboration with World Bank, has targets to increase the participation of women in short-term vocational training. It is a supporting program to skill training schemes like PMKVY. The Jan Shiksha Sansthan is an old scheme under the Ministry of Human Resources Development and has now again been revived under the MSDE. It focuses on skilling non-literate and school dropouts, especially women. The National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme, NAPS, was launched in 2016 and follows the apprenticeship model for skilling and placement. It links courses under PMKVY and DDUGKY with apprenticeship program training to prepare candidates for the job market. However, it does not have any provisions especially targeted at women and can be said to be gender blind in this case. The Support to Training and Employment Program for Women, STEP, is the oldest skilling program in the country. It was launched in 1986 and implemented by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. It trains women to become self-employed or entrepreneurs. However, the scheme has become largely ineffective, though with its budget remaining underutilized. Also, over the years, the budget for this particular program has been cut significantly, and as such, has almost been the scheme has almost been uh, redundant. This particular slide looks at the existing literature around the important determinants that affect women's choices of enrolling into skilling courses. This institute's distance from home, as well as the availability of safe transport to facilitate travel to the institute, is an important factor for women to access skill. Gender norms around mobility, along with concerns of safety, violence at the workplace, at the institute, and on the road, are important deterrents to women's access to skilling. One must also understand that women have the unequal burden of care and unpaid work, and because of which there is very little time to access skilling or decent jobs. Hence, duration of the course is an important factor to be thought about while designing any skilling program or scheme for women. Further, basic amenities and infrastructure like toilets, hostels, creches for women, etc., including public provisioning of safe and potable drinking water, uh, safe and good transport facilities, roads, etc., are also important factors that determine whether the woman will be able to go for any skilling program. As also mentioned earlier, the digital divide is another problem for and is a deterrent again for women to access any skilling for in the digital world. Further, lack of career counseling, post training advice, and placement offers often make trainees lose motivation and interest. These are some of the factors that definitely impact women's access and choice of enrolling into skilling courses. I will now talk about this particular study. This study was partnered with member organizations of the Non-Traditional Livelihoods Network. The study founded itself in the definition of NTL Skilling adopted by the NTL Network 2016, which was both broad, inclusive, and multidimensional. We will be talking about this particular definition in the further slides. The research question for this particular study was when and how does skill development in non traditional livelihoods contribute towards women's economic empowerment? Leading from that, these were some of the other sub questions that we were looking at. What are the aspirations of women in non traditional livelihoods and how are they involved in non traditional forms of skill development? How do the skilling opportunities extended by the partner organization match the aspirations of women? What are the resources and processes required at various stages of skill development in the NTL sector? Further, what is the nature of agency showed by women in NTL across socioeconomic and political institutions? In what ways do families, communities, market, and state respond to skilling women in non traditional livelihoods? And lastly, in what way does the NTL skilling facilitate women's relationship with technology? The research question and the sub questions were looked at from the angle of the four institutional space: family, community, market, and state. Hence, going further, we would like to I would like to add that each of the analysis has been across these four institutional spaces. This study foregrounds itself in Naila Kabeer's framework of empowerment in the context of power, ability to make choices when denied this ability. It leads to disempowerment. She encapsulates empowerment as a process of change, which enables the person to make strategic life choices in a context where the ability was previously denied to them. The empowerment process happens through the three interrelated dimensions: resources, agency, and achievement. This framework was useful for this research as NTL skilling for women entails a process of change with an aim to develop an agency for the women to have the ability of making choices which are essential for well being. This study was a qualitative study, and we used the case study method, and 8 in-depth case studies were conducted for the purpose of the study. Uh, for the case study, we spoke to the primary respondent, and as well as we spoke to the trainer, one family member, and other relevant key informants pertaining to that particular person's skilling journey. So, a total of 46 in depth interviews, including the 8 case narratives and KIs, and 3 FGDs with skill project participants across 3 locations were conducted. A purposive maximum variation sampling technique was utilized for this particular study because we wanted to capture a wide range of perspectives to maximize diversity within the selected sample. So for this particular sampling, we sent the partners who were part of this project and to identify respondents across a matrix that we had prepared beforehand. The matrix, of course, had the age, the social locations such as caste, religion, then the particular uh, you know uh, the particular training, as well as the number of children, her family members, whether she was a primary occupation, primary earner or not, any disability, any gender. So these were some of the indicators that we wanted to capture in order to have a wider and maximum range of sample for the case studies. As I mentioned in my earlier slide, we identified the case categories based on the NTL network's broad definition, which was broad, inclusive, and multidimensional. So the 8 case narratives were founded across the 4 case categories. These were, for example, the first case, category 1, were cases that break gender stereotypes in terms of sectors. So, for instance, very direct cases of women driving cabs uh, for women carpenters, etc. The second case studies were cases wherein new technology was accessed that was hitherto not used in the specific instance. For example, use of mobile phones and platform economy to get work, even if it is in sectors otherwise considered as traditional. So, for example, a woman beauty worker working on a platform. The third case category were cases wherein non-traditional gender roles were adopted. For example, skilling for in a managerial role or entrepreneurial roles, whether or not if it was in a traditional sector or a non-traditional sector, because these are mainly dominated by men. So that was another category we thought we could capture here. And the fourth case category was for cases wherein access to skilling program itself was non-traditional. So, for example, in cases when that meant breaking prevalent social cultural traditions and norms. So, for example, a woman from a very impoverished tribal area where before her nobody had accessed any skilling program, and she was probably, accessing a skilling program. Such a category would then fall in this particular category. Yeah. So, to cover the case categories, we reached out to partners in the NTL network. The process was multi layered. We spoke to the steering committee, presented the particular study, we spoke to various partners, and eventually we zeroed down to these five particular organizations. Some of them were primarily engaged in skilling women in non traditional livelihoods. For example, the oldest one, Archana Women's Center in Kerala, or Azad Foundation in Delhi and in Kolkata. Uh, then there were other organizations which were involved in skilling per se, but and had a range of other programs like Center for Youth and Social Development, CYSD in Odisha. But they had, in fact, networked with Azad Foundation and come up with a four-wheel driving course for women in Bhubaneswar. There was Jabala Action Research Organization, which actually works on implementing programs with girls and women who have been trafficked or belong to areas prone to either trafficking or unsafe migration owing to a lack of economic opportunity. So here there was an instance where young girls and women had, during the COVID pandemic lockdown, insisted on learning a trade that would help them to earn money. And then they put forth this idea of house painting with Jawala Action Research Organization. And the first batch had been newly trained the skill of house painting, and they were now trying to establish themselves within Birpara in Alipurduar district in West Bengal. And then, of course, there's Magic Pass, which is a large scale skilling CSO for men and women from resource poor communities pan India. We in particularly looked at the entrepreneurship development program. This was a short program in Delhi NCR, and we spoke to two such cases in each of these particular uh, organizations and their particular programs. This particular slide shows the respondent profile. As you see, in each of the four categories, we adopted two cases, across the five organizations and their five particular programs. Uh, as per our matrix that was shared, we tried to, as much as possible, cover as many, different intersectionalities as possible. Uh, one that we could not cover, in fact, was any person with disability, and none, we could not find any examples of such, at least in these organizations, uh, which was much limited in its sample size. Uh, so, as we can see from this particular slide, there was a mix of married and never married women, of course, younger women who were never married. There was one transgender person who identified herself as a female, and she had, in fact, obtained training under CYSD for a four-wheel driving program. So this was the range, and this across the various locations where these organizations uh, work. So the study began with asking our respondents the question around what they aspired to be before they started the skilling journey. The aspirations range from the ability to earn money to the ability to earn money and build a house to the possibility of going out in the world, meeting different people. So there was a range of aspirations. What was very interesting was most of the girls and women actually were able to state this, that they wanted to stand out in the crowd and they wanted to make an identity of one's own self. And that is why they were very interested to enroll themselves in a non traditional livelihood skilling as opposed to a very feminized traditional form of skilling. One of the most important impetus that women are attracted towards NTL programs to establish their own identity, as was shared by one of the KI interview, and the same was, uh, you know, again established by our own findings. A very important role is played by CSOs and training organizations that have been working with communities and have placed themselves in communities. They help women to aspire. They help stoke the fire of embedded embers of aspirations. So they give a opportunity to these girls and women to come up and reflect and think of what they can do beyond. Community role models also act in shaping aspiration. So as soon as the first batch of, say, four-wheeler drivers passed out, and we saw that a few of them were placed in various, various companies and uh, uh, various government agencies. For example, in Bhubaneswar, three of the women were placed in driving their light garbage collecting vehicles, LMVs, and that was an aspiration for many women then to actually try to come out of the shell and try their luck in skilling themselves in a non-traditional livelihood. So it breaks norms. These role models actually then allow women and their families to consider that probably it's a good idea to invest in something like this and to try and see if they can be placed in higher jobs and have a better ability to earn decent wages. Yeah. Going back to Naila Kabeer's framework of women's empowerment, we started to look at supportive resources that enable women to access non traditional livelihood skilling in the realm of the family, the market, the state, and the community. And the fifth actor and institution that was important in our study that and emerged during the study was the CSO themselves. So, in the realm of the family, women needed support to take care of their unpaid care work. For this, they mainly seeked out other female relatives and friends from their communities and families, often these being their own sisters, mothers, or mothers in law. Along with that, it was very important to have male validation and at least some form of verbal support from the family. In case of the married women, it was their husbands, and in case of unmarried or never married women, was either their fathers or their brothers. As can be seen from this particular quote by Diksha in Kottayam, if you are getting a supportive husband like mine, it's like a cherry on cake. And the community support is something that needs more unpacking. Women's families are often the first line of defense. When a woman goes out to access education or jobs or skilling, often the community can be quite negative. One needs to hear, one gets to hear that friends and families often come in and will share that if a girl starts going out or if she's seeking skilling, she may disrupt the family, she may never get married, etc. So having a supportive community is very important for women, as it also impacts the family's sensibility towards them accessing and skilling. The CSOs play an important role in actually establishing a supportive community. In fact, in various communities, wherever the CSOs were active or had been working for long years or had established a field office, one saw that there was a more openness in the community towards women's and girls' aspirations and access to NTL skilling. Another very important component of any skilling process is a gender just and gender sensitive curriculum. Uh, it's one if one looked at one of the courses, similar courses of four-wheel driving skilling that was initiated by the Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation, but it failed because the course designers did not have a gender sensitive curriculum, and they were imparting the course in a very rigid manner which was not attuned to women's requirements, timings, etc. So there is a need to be sensitive while one sort of draws or designs a course for women's skilling, and it needs to have a holistic pedagogy. Uh, for example, in Achana Women's Center, one of the oldest centers imparting non-traditional skilling for women, no technical skill chapter began before 4 days of the training duration. The first 3 to 4 days were actually spent with the women who would share their narratives with each other in the batch, in the classroom. This helped women in, in putting forth their stories and gave them confidence. It sort of helped empty themselves, the balance of their lives before they started actually to pick up technical skills. Similarly, it is important for the state and the market to intervene and to have and give and provide opportunities for NTL. As of now, policymakers as well as the market is hesitant towards getting women into NTL occupations and livelihoods. While there is a lot of hue and cry about it, in actuality, that is not the case. And hence, women often do not have access to jobs after they have skill, which leads to demotivation. And then, even if they do get into a job, these are often designed again from a male worker point of view. And hence, it becomes difficult for women to sustain in such particular occupations. There is also often a craze for scale amongst market and state policymakers because they want to see the number of women skilled. However, when it comes to skilling women, it's not the expanse of numbers, rather the depth of scale that is necessary. So, smaller batches of women and longer time duration is important for women to actually access and complete their courses before moving on to livelihood options. It was very difficult to fathom agency when speaking to women. Different women have different agentic journeys, uh, but from the analysis, we started thinking of from bottom up. So in the household and community, women were able to say that because of their access to non-traditional livelihood skilling and opportunities in jobs of NTL, they were able to negotiate within their families. So, for example, Nasreen says that I told my mother that I learned driving and nothing else. They were able to articulate their aspirations, which was either earning a lot of money or being able to do something different. And then to consciously prioritize. So, a lot of women kept saying how they would negotiate with their families, prioritize some, and then go and then seek skilling. During the skilling process, women were able to voice opinions. In case of the Archana Women's Center, one saw that the young CAG members suggested that now the times have changed and they wanted to get into mobile mechanism and computer classes. And hence, AWC started organizing such skilling. The CSOs also facilitated relationship with technology. So, for example, in four-wheel driving, women were taught how to navigate maps, how to take in digital payments, etc. Women were also scared of using WhatsApp and Facebook because they were never allowed any access or control over digital devices within their houses, which are often owned and managed by the male members in the family. So these opportunities were eye-opening. Women found that they could do much more, and that led to a lot of confidence in them. It helped them to identify everyday agentic achievements. With the state and the market, a lot of women said, in whichever CSOs there was a gender just curriculum, one saw market improvement by the time women came out of their skilling journeys. They would be able to negotiate with their employers, they were able to negotiate with unions. One could see that they were even negotiating with policymakers wherever they were given the opportunities. So there was a lot of agency that was being created. It ebbed and flowed with a person's journey. Sometimes, while the woman was in the skilling journey, she was more able to voice her opinion, which, if she was not able to get a job or sustain in a job, while remnants of it remain, but sometimes women were losing those agencies beyond a particular time. So, how do you understand empowerment in the NTL skilling journey? Now, various scholars have defined empowerment in various ways. Kabeer defines empowerment as a dynamic process in which women acquire resources and that enables them to develop voice, the capacity to articulate preferences, and agency. Amartya Sen, he explains the emphasis on creating agency through economic gains so that women do not remain passive recipients of welfare programs, but are enabled to make informed choices for her and her family's economic well-being. It recognizes the woman's personhood as economic agents in the labor market and within the families. So, coming to this present study, in terms of explicit outcomes based on the restricted sample that it had selected, that it concludes that for most of the individual cases, the NTL training program did get translated into economic gains through non-traditional livelihoods. This was mainly possible through the intervention of the COCs and their constant negotiations with the state and employers in the market, who would then hire these women. So, for example, the Azad Foundation has, for the last 8 years, working with the Delhi government to to reverse a law on the height of bus drivers, so that women could now apply for bus driving under the Delhi Transport Corporation. For other, however, the training did not translate into economic gains, and this was due to a variety of factors. There were strict parents who there were gender norms. There was lack of demand, as we saw in case of the house painters who were just trying to establish themselves. Inability to practice post training. One sees that the longer the gap is between the skill gained and the placement in jobs, one sees an inverse relationship. The women often drop out of the labor market. Then one sees the lack of resources and assets as a difficulty in actually gaining non-traditional, you know, jobs such as smartphones or vehicles or grass cutting equipments, etc. And of course, the unpaid care burden. Women often are not able to establish themselves even after getting these skills because of their unpaid care burdens. However, skilling did lead to varied outcomes for each individual case. They were able to some said they were able to negotiate, they got confidence, they aspired more. So it opened up a possibility that even if the woman was not able to gain an immediate economic uh, gain, she would in the long run, because of this skill that she has adopted and the other things that she has learned during her skilling journey, will help her to establish herself within her community, either through an economic agent or through another role that she thinks will help her to establish herself as a person. To be empowered at an individual level depends to quite some extent on the environment in which the individual lives. So, this means that the way empowerment is conceptualized is also bound to the extremely context specific and is based on the diversity of circumstances, as we saw in our case, uh, across our cases, which were located in various different urban, peri-urban, rural areas across the nation, across programs, across various different locations, and how that impacted her ability to aspire, to access a skill, to then find a job uh, based on her skilling journey, etc. So again, to reiterate, what did skilling in NTL for her mean? It was a ability to dream big, a potential to earn more money. She challenged norms, and as I mentioned, a role model of an NTL livelihood and skilling often helped and had a triggering impact within such communities, and one found more women coming out of their homes and try and seek their luck within the NTL skilling. There was also a change in our personality. Women said that how I walk, how I dress, how I speak has changed through my NTL skilling by because uh, especially how gender just programs and the skill plus programs that are run by feminist skilling organizations gave a 360-degree worldview and not just technical skills, and that helped her to gain confidence, and that also inspired others then. For example, this one particular woman who had learned how to drive a four-wheeler and was now placed as a garbage collector driver with the Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation says how her in-laws in the village were completely against her for learning to drive. Now everyone comes to meet me to see who is this woman who drives in the city. I take gifts from them, and now they're okay with it. These quotes here reiterate what NTL skilling for women entails, and it is much bigger than only economic gains or only scaling programs. So, for example, one person who was trained in carpentry in Kerala said how precious her skilling journey was, and that she feels so proud and happy when she shows her finished products to people. Then there was another person who's a trainer. She sort of points out that how different it is in designing and imparting a course, or skilling courses for men and women. She says how girls were scared of even touching the mouse of the computer, and it took us quite some time for them to actually be able to start using the mouse without being apologetic. There was another example of the transgender person in Bhubaneswar. She often always felt that whenever she would raise her hand to stop a vehicle on the road, some of them would not stop and they would pass comments on her. And this would make the fire in her burn, that one day she would also learn to drive and show that she can do something different. So these are examples of how NTL skilling is important, and at the same time, how different it is to skill men and women, and that one skilling program may not be enough for skilling both men and girls, and skilling for girls and women is more time intensive, more resource intensive, and governments and markets need to understand this. So what helps and what does not, to conclude? So the family definitely is important factor in a woman's ability to access and sustain her skilling journey, and hence a supportive family is always important for a woman to aspire. But the challenge here is often care duties and domestic chores, and the lack of public investment in quality childcare creches or provisioning of drinking water, etc., which takes a lot of time for women. Uh, the challenge with communities is, of course, the gender stereotyping, the gender roles ascribed in the markets, and the community expectation of how a woman should behave uh, are some of the challenges. But at the same time, a community can also provide and influence aspiration. It can also provide access to important resources that can help women access NTL skilling and livelihoods thereafter. The role of the CSOs were very, very important in this particular study. They helped nurture aspiration, matching changing aspirations, help created a gender sensitive curriculum, holistic pedagogy. There was hand holding, pre and post skilling by many of the feminist skilling organizations that negotiated with families, with the girls and the women, and at the same time negotiated with the state and market to enable women to access NTL skilling and NTL occupations thereafter. Some of the challenges that they faced were, of course, resources, distance, travel, time, training period, care infrastructure, post-training, handholding. As programs, budgets are limited, and it is important for the state then to be able to take these examples of designed courses for women and scale up. Then, of course, the role of state and the market. While there is a supply side being created, the demand side is still hesitant to have women come in and take over non-traditional jobs. This employability is important, and equal pay for equal work is important. It is the gender role, the onboarding of gender roles into market roles, uh, both by the policymakers as well as the markets, has always been a deterrent. It is also important to understand that the same skilling project may not be useful uh, to impart to women and men at the same time. Women's requirements, timelines are very different. Their level of understanding, owing to the time crunch and the resource crunch, and their personalities is different because of the gender norms. And hence, one needs to have a gender transformative sort of a curriculum that takes into account all of these. Only then will women be able to access and retain themselves in such skilling opportunities. So to conclude, we came up with certain recommendations based on our findings of the study. The number one was to recognize and redistribute women's unpaid work and care work. Women do have a burden of unequal care work and unpaid work. And it is important for government, for states, families, and communities to realign themselves to this unequal burden and help women save time so that she can actually move out and access skilling programs and livelihoods. One of the ways that can be done is by provisioning of infrastructure and other public goods and services. The safe mobility, safe roads, water, quality childcare, quality and affordable childcare centers, etc., help in this particular aspiration. Dismantling gender norms. Programming is needed around masculinities. Gender norms have always been a big barrier for women to step out of their houses and access any sort of skilling program or livelihood opportunities. Uh, Gender based violence is another big deterrent, be it at the domestic level or in public spaces, which again challenge women's ability to move out and access upskilling programs. Increased access and participation in skilling and employment opportunities. This can be done through a gender just and gender transformative skilling syllabus and curriculum adopted by the state. There is also a need for a more robust after skilling apprenticeship, which will help in reducing the gap between skilling and employment and probably also help more women to sustain themselves for longer durations within the labor force. Also, better integration of programs and funding and partnership between CSO, state, and the market. The CSOs, especially the feminist organizations, have been able to show what is needed to to impart NTL skilling for women, what works and what doesn't work. The state and the market needs to take on this and scale it, and at the same time must let go of internal prejudices and gender stereotyping and be more open and create opportunities for women to seek NTL skilling and come into the labor force participation with equal wages, decent work conditions, and a more equality and a more on more equal terms. Thank you so much for listening in. For more details about the study, please reach me at Anweshaa at issstindia.org.